Hi, this is Alan Brochstein from 420 Investor and New Cannabis Ventures, and I want to thank you for tuning in today as I speak about what I think is the third opportunity since I've been following cannabis stocks to participate in a broad market rally. Before I get going, just a little bit about myself. I've been studying the cannabis industry since 2013. Late in that year, I started 420 Investor, which I'll speak about more extensively today. And I started in 2015 New Cannabis Ventures, which is free to the public and supported by advertising. And this is a great source of information on the real cannabis industry. I'm not going to really speak about that more today, but you can check that out at newcannabisventures.com. What I would like to talk about today is briefly why invest in cannabis. First of all, it's a rapidly growing industry. The fact that you're tuning in probably means that you already know that. The part that may not be clear is that there are actually real investment opportunities. It tends to be more of a trading market. It was a lot more of a Wild West when I started following it in 2013, but it remains somewhat of a Wild West mentality today, but there are actually real investment opportunities. And finally, I think we're going to see the third major rally since 2014. So today what I'd like to talk about is a little bit of an explanation of what 420 Investor is, a review of the cannabis stock trading history over the last several years, and then a discussion of this Cali rally, as I've termed it, and finally how to capitalize. So what is 420 Investor? First of all, this was the very first subscription service for the cannabis industry that was launched in 2013, and that's all that it is focused on. It's a platform with many features. I get a lot of questions about what exactly is 420 Investor. Some think it's just a newsletter. It's much, much more, which I'll describe. Unlike a lot of other services out there, whether they're in cannabis or others, I hold the Chartered Financial Analyst charter since 1997. I've been an investment professional since 1986, and I've been focused full-time on the cannabis industry since early 2014 after beginning my due diligence in a year prior. And another thing that's not well understood about 420 Investor is that there's an incredible amount of community interaction that is really a big part of the service as well. And we do have about 600 members. One thing I didn't put on this slide that I think it's important to share, I'm extremely transparent. I do have some conflicts of interest which I disclose, but I've never invested in a cannabis stock. I try to make sure everybody understands my motivations, and truly at 420 Investor, it is run for the benefit of investors. I've earned a reputation as a watchdog for people who invest in the cannabis industry. Let me talk about some of the features briefly. So I've listed most of them here. The service comes with what's called an activity feed, and this allows you to receive text or email alerts. Not email, I blew that. There's also a big part of the service, and I think this helps to explain what I'm doing. I've created a focus list, which right now has 25 names, but there's a broad list that is about 600 names, almost 600, including the 25 on the focus list, plus about 570 more right now. Now, not all these are active, but these are names that have been cannabis companies over the last several years. So I do follow a very broad list of securities, but I focus on a narrower list. That narrower list, for the most part, are actively traded names and or names that I find to be of interest, sometimes referred to as hidden gems by many, and that has been the case. It includes 4 model portfolios, which I'll describe. It has a forum, which is just an incredible resource that allows people to go back in time and look at all the news and information about companies. I do SEC filing reviews here as well, and members, there are actually a lot of forums I have nothing to do with. It's all member driven, so there are literally hundreds of conversations a week. We have a weekly chat on Wednesday nights, runs about an hour, and it allows the community to ask me questions and get answers. I publish on Friday nights a weekly summary. There's a lot of information on 420 Investor. This is a good way to really hone in on what happened during the week. And finally, there's a monthly newsletter, which I'll discuss as well. All right, so the alerts. I mentioned earlier it's email or text. This is how I provide news updates, primarily on the focus list, but sometimes other information that would be relevant for anybody investing in the cannabis space. I share blog posts here. The videos that I'll describe are published in the activity feed. So if you log on to 420 Investor, you're going to get all of this just by logging on and looking at it, but you also can receive email or text alerts as well. The trade alerts are posted in the activity feed. And finally, an important feature is that members are able to comment on each and every post that's in the activity feed. I mentioned that there's 4 unique model portfolios. The first one, and these are listed, well, the first 3 are actually on the MarketFi platform. These are model portfolios. As I mentioned earlier, I do not trade stocks. I am not a front runner. I don't make a penny whether anybody buys a stock or doesn't buy a stock. Just want to make that real clear. First model that I introduced is called now Flying High, and that launched in late 2013. These are the holdings. You can't actually see the tickers, but you can see when you're logged in as a member, you would get the tickers and what the current positions are. You could click and find out the rationale for the trade, and it says when it was opened, what the cost is and what the current value is. And you can see a couple things here. This model portfolio, which is focused on swing trading, so not day trading and not long-term investing, but trying to typically find trades that I believe have 4-to-1 upside to downside over the next 2 weeks, although sometimes they run longer, sometimes shorter. The model portfolio was, as I mentioned, launched in late 2013. It had a starting cash value of $10,000. It's currently worth $61,000. It's up about 25, almost 25% year to date. And this model portfolio doesn't have to have any positions. Sometimes it has 0 cash, sometimes it has a lot more. The second model portfolio was launched in April of 2014. It's longer term focused but very actively traded. There is a cash limitation. I can only have 20% cash in there, so it's not a market timing portfolio for the most part, but I do rotate a lot between different names. And I should have mentioned on Flying High, not all the trades are from the focus list, and the same might be the case for 420 Opportunity, but for the most part in 420 Opportunity. And since the model was launched, there was a very small drawdown, although the overall market had dropped dramatically. In fact, it had dropped, I want to say about 40% at its peak from when I launched, but the drawdown was never that big. And since launch, I think the market is now up about 4%, and this is up 39%. It's been a fabulous model portfolio, and glad to have added it to the list. And then finally, I do a monthly fully invested model portfolio for the Canadian LPs. This has had very good performance as well. I do 10 videos a week. They tend to have a technical focus, and for the most part I really focus on the focus list, but I also provide an overall market perspective. While it's a technical review, this is a great opportunity for me to share my view on any recent news. And what I do is each morning at about 11 Eastern time I release a morning video, and that runs typically about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're 5 a week obviously. And then in the evening I'll release what I call a pre-market video, which is about the same duration, about 15 minutes typically. And then on the weekend, recently they've been running almost 2 hours. That's a record. But more typically, the weekend edition, I go over each and every name on the focus list. I also include a few additional names, and this typically runs about an hour, and it's a very obviously technical review, but I also do the same thing I do during the week, which is make sure I get the recent news in there. The 420 Investor Forum is really one of the key benefits of being a member of 420 Investor. Uh, this is a picture of what it looks like when one is logged in and just looking at the by the most recent posts. And you can see a lot of these weren't even started by me. A lot of these are member driven. But here, like Aurora, which is a focus list name, Aurora Cannabis has 9,400 page views so far, 676 different posts in it. It's one of the more active ones, but you can see TerraTech up above, 56,000 views, 3,300 posts. But point I was trying to make there is there's a lot of diversity here, and you can do search chronologically within a ticker forum or any forum. There's forums that are set up for a variety of topics. You're also able to do search. There's a lot of community participation, and there's a broad amount of due diligence. As I mentioned earlier, this is where I break down all the filings, post a lot of press releases, but it's really my contribution. I answer questions there when people have questions about the stocks, and I also share a lot due diligence there. The Investor 420 Investor monthly newsletter is part of the full service. It is also a separate option for those that don't want to be inundated with too much information. It's a great criticism. Alan, you're putting out way too much info for me. Well, I hear that from a few people. Most people like it. But for those that really don't want that much, they're too busy to take advantage of everything and don't want the full service, I do offer the newsletter option as a standalone. You can see each month I mail it out typically on the last day of the month or early on the first day of the month, and it gives a breakdown of what's in the newsletter. And this is what the newsletter looks like. And starts with the month in review and the outlook. So I've been publishing these since 2013, and they follow the same format. There's a market review, 3 feature articles where I try to give something very different than what I'm sharing on a day-to-day basis. I really try to share a longer-term perspective. These are the whole PDF files usually about 16 to 18 pages, I think. So it's not a quick read. It's very thorough. I also include important focus list news as well as the returns for the month. And then I also have a lot of information on the Canadian LP model portfolio in that newsletter. Look, let me just say, 420 Investor gets incredible reviews. Not everybody likes it. I encourage you to take a look at some of these 1-star reviews. They're kind of eye-opening as well. I think they tell you a lot about how people feel when they're making money and not making money. Remember, which I'll show you in a minute, but the cannabis stocks have had big ups and big downs. But an overwhelming percentage of the people who have taken the time to fill out reviews, or ratings, I should say, give it 5 stars. In fact, 1,256 out of 1,385 have been 4-star or 5-star, and then an average rating of 4.6. Here's some of the more recent reviews. These are all the reviews I've gotten in November. Maybe they're a little friendlier because the market's been doing well, but you can find all the reviews and search on them. Search the good ones, search the bad ones. I think they really do a good job of explaining why people like 420 Investor. I'll just leave that up for a second in case anybody wants to read it. You can always pause and look. Okay, so what's the cannabis stock history? It's been very interesting. On the left I have just the performance so far this year, and we started off with a pretty big rally, and quite frankly I really didn't see this coming, and my portfolios weren't really structured for it. It was kind of a flight into biotech names. It was interesting. But then Sean Spicer communicated what was really for the first time the Trump administration had really communicated everything, even though he wasn't really necessarily authorized to say it, and ultimately it didn't even resonate with the way things have played out. That set off a big slide, and the market dropped 48% or something like that, peak to trough. We bottomed out in June, and we were going sideways, and in late October the market was very close to this low, so some might call that a double bottom, and we have been on a tear the last few weeks. The month of November, the market's up over, I think, 44%. And the reason for this really boils down to, in my opinion, the Constellation Brands investment into Canopy growth, and it really set off a lot of interest in not only the LPs, but oddly enough, U.S. names as well, and it's been very broad. Looking at a longer-term perspective on the right, I've been tracking these prices. It's a quarterly rebalanced index, equal weighted. You can learn more about that by visiting New Cannabis Ventures, where I publish this all publicly. But it started at 100 in 2000, at the end of 2012, and we soared in early 2014. And I'll talk about this more in a minute. You'll never see this type of action again. It went from, basically 100 to 1,000, 10x in 2 months, and then we had a long slide, and it's hard to appreciate what's happened subsequently. But we bottomed out in early 2016. That's what this would be. And made kind of a double bottom, and then the stocks, which I'll show you in a moment, basically tripled. And this was due to the election rally from last year that started essentially on Labor Day and ended right before the election. So what's the next big trade? This is why I wanted you to tune in. And look, I'm more known for bashing the posers out there and scammers than I am for pumping cannabis stocks. And you won't hear me or see me putting out information about my views on individual stocks or really trying to pump things. But I feel like I do have a responsibility to share that I have a very bullish view right now. And yes, it's more trading oriented than fundamental, although I do have a much improving fundamental view. As I mentioned earlier, I started that 420 quality model portfolio earlier this year because of that, and I could go on and on about all the positives that I'm seeing, whether it's what's going on in Canada, what's going on with high revenue growth among, or not just growth, but levels among some of even the OTC US names. So I just want to say, I know I sound a little bit promotional here, but and you know what, if you're going to join just to make money in the short term, I don't even want you, honestly. So I don't mean to dissuade anybody, but I do think this is for people that want to start learning about the market. You can actually pay for several years of your subscription potentially by getting in front of what I've called the Cali rally. So the first trade, and I alluded to this earlier, was in the end of 2013 into early 2014, and it really took off January 1st. That's when Colorado legalized, and I showed you earlier, the market essentially went from 100 or so in December to 1,000, a 10x, and the market actually bottomed in August, and I don't even have the exact bottom. I should have extended this just a little bit, but there are a couple things that happened in August 2013 that convinced me to go into this industry and start 420 Investor after having done research for about 6 months in advance of that, and that was what was known as the Cole Memo, which really permitted Colorado and Washington to legalize. It gave the entrepreneurs and regulators there the basis to proceed without fear of interference from the federal government. It was key. And then there was also the Sanjay Gupta reversal. This is a guy that used to bash medical marijuana, saying it had no value, and then he's the CNN chief medical correspondent, and through a series of 3 shows, documentaries called Weed. Sanjay Gupta did a very public mea culpa and apologized for being wrong, and that was a major thought leader move. So these things, in the kind of people getting excited about Colorado, lifted the market up off of some weakness that it had seen earlier in the year, and then we took off. Well, as I said before, this will never happen again. Let me tell you the secret. There weren't very many cannabis stocks then. Now there's a ton. I just told you there's like 600. They don't all trade, but certainly a couple hundred that actually trade, maybe 300. The second big trade was last year, and I extended this a little bit so you can see. It really, I predicted it would start August 31st or September 1st, and that is when it really started. We actually dropped a little bit in July, and I shared these predictions in advance with my subscribers, and I also said I expected the trade to end right at or slightly before the election, which turned out to be the case too. So I did get that one right. This trade, honestly, blew me away. I never would have thought it would happen to this extent. And my model portfolios did fine, but I have to say I was a lot more cautious than I should have been. This trade, though, I got the timing right, and the market basically tripled off of the lows, almost tripled off of the lows. If you look at where it was on August 31st, not quite a triple, almost a triple. This trade coming up, California, I've shared a start date with my subscribers already, and I publish that in my monthly newsletter, and I've been talking about it actually for quite some time. I have a start date, I have a stop date, and it's coming up soon. I don't think that this recent rally that we've had is actually that much related to California, although it certainly helps because this is no secret catalyst. California is the largest state, and I think what's going to drive new traders into the market is going to be an extensive media focus. What I've done is I've provided my subscribers with a framework for picking stocks. I've already shared my focus list. I've described the framework to my subscribers as well as preliminary scores for all the focus list names. What I'll be sharing in the November 30th newsletter, or what I call the December newsletter, which I expect to get out in the evening on November 30th, is I've gone over about over 100 stocks. They've been scored on 5 factors. 80% are technical and 20% are fundamental. So you can get a score of 0 to 2. So you see those scores on here, 2, 0. And I have found 10 focus list names that have a score of 7 or higher. And then I have 27 other names from the broad list as well. And as I said, this will be published November 30th. I explain each of these factors there, and this isn't the purpose, but the purpose is this. If you are looking to get into cannabis stocks and you don't want to be blindsided, I think this list will be very helpful to you. It's my best guess at the names that should do well, and it's kind of tricky. I wish it was as easy as find the companies that are really doing real business in California, but unfortunately that's not the way it works. So it's really more of a technical thing, as I mentioned. So that was really the purpose of this video, to kind of lay out that I do expect there's going to be a big rally starting in December, and you can get that exact date now by subscribing, or you can get it later by subscribing. If you want to join 420 Investor, there's 2 ways to join the full service. It's $42 a month or $420 a year, which is basically 2 months free. There's also, as I described earlier, the monthly newsletter option, and that's $149 per year. Again, that's 12 issues. I've described what they are. It's basically 16 to 18 pages chock full of information. The products do have a 30-day full refund policy, and you can sign up for either by visiting, well, actually I kind of blew that. So if you go to www.420investor.com, you will get the full service. It's a little bit different to find the newsletter. It's a little buried, but I will provide the links to each of those for the monthly or annual subscription for the VIP premium, or for the monthly newsletter. So I do appreciate you taking the time to listen to me, and I wish you the best if you're